If you've ever been on, like, a major movie backlot, there is this incredibly surreal moment when you walk down what looks like a completely authentic, bustling city street.
Oh, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. The fake storefronts.
Right, exactly. Like, the brickwork looks textured and real, the windows look rock solid, but then you lean against the side of a bank building and the entire wall just wobbles.
Because it's literally just painted plywood.
Yeah, it's plywood. The narrative your eyes are being sold is totally disconnected from the physical reality underneath.
Well, and it's a facade built entirely on this shared agreement to just, believe the illusion. As long as nobody pushes too hard on that plywood, the whole thing holds up perfectly.
And pushing on that plywood is exactly what we are doing today. So welcome to the deep dive. We have a massive stack of source material to get through for you today.
We really do.
Yeah, it's primarily curated from the August 4, 2026 edition of the Morning Sixpack newsletter. And they're pulling together some really heavy-hitting reporting from Al Jazeera, NPR, the New York Times, and the Washington Post.
So we've got a lot of ground to cover.
Oh, for sure. And our mission today is basically to look at what happens when the carefully constructed stories told by people in power inevitably crash into cold, hard facts. It's the collision of narrative and reality.
Which is a collision we are seeing across the board right now. I mean, from global trade all the way down to local courtrooms.
We really are. Now, I do need to say right up front, as we unpack this stack, we're going to hit some deeply partisan tripwires involving both the left wing and the right wing.
Definitely. It gets pretty heated.
Right, and our job today isn't to pick a side or endorse any of these views. We're just here to pop the hood and show you how the engine of this political rhetoric actually works. We are strictly neutral analysts, reporting on the ideas and facts and the sources so you can fully understand the dynamics at play.
Exactly. We're just looking at the mechanics of it all.
Right. So let's start at the highest possible altitude, which is global geopolitics. We are looking at a Washington Post report detailing how foreign governments are increasingly just, ignoring President Trump's ultimatums.
Yeah, they're just tuning it out.
Right, whether it's about tariffs or trade routes, NATO contributions, or even buying Greenland, the financial markets are barely reacting. Allies in Europe, rivals like China, nations like Brazil, they are resisting demands rather than rushing to concede.
And the shift in diplomatic physics here is profound. I mean, for a long time, the threat of unpredictable action was a primary tool of leverage for the executive branch.
Because it creates panic.
Exactly. The sheer bluster created a sort of panic, and that panic often led to preemptive concessions. But what the Washington Post analysis outlines is that the international community has fundamentally adjusted its baseline.
Which means they aren't falling for the illusion anymore.
Right. When you look at how commodity markets price in tariffs, they used to price in the panic of the initial threat. Now, financial algorithms and human analysts, they wait to see if customs agencies are actually drafting new regulations.
Wow. So they just wait for the paperwork?
Yeah, if the paperwork isn't moving, the market ignores the tweet. They are choosing patience over panic.
The newsletter actually points out that diplomats are literally using the acronym TACO, like TACO, meaning threats are completely optional, to describe how they handle these demands.
I love that acronym. It really captures the mood.
It really does. It's become this accepted reality. Foreign leaders will flatter the administration publicly because they know it might help negotiations, but they firmly distinguish between the rhetorical threats and actual on-the-ground policy.
Because the flattery is just the performance, right? It's the world leaders playing their part on the movie set.
But when it comes time to alter supply chains, they're dealing with the plywood.
Exactly. They are actively mapping the limits imposed on the executive branch by Congress, by the courts, and by domestic political realities. And they are calculating that the threats simply lack the structural support to materialize.
I see the logic there, but it seems to me that diplomatic capital is essentially currency. The editor of the newsletter had this great analogy. Credibility is like a savings account. You can make withdrawals for a while, but eventually everyone notices when the balance gets thin.
That is a perfect way to put it. You overdraw your account and suddenly your checks bounce.
Right. And this brings up a massive disconnect, perfectly illustrated in an Al Jazeera report about Iran. So Trump is publicly claiming that negotiations with Iran are actively underway. He's saying it's their last chance to reach an agreement tied to the Strait of Hormuz.
But Tehran is flatly denying that any direct talks even exist.
Exactly. President Pezeshkian says they don't want escalation, but there was absolutely no deal on the table. And they state any contact is strictly through regional mediators, like Qatar.
So we have this bizarre gap where the two sides can't even agree on the physical reality of whether they are sitting in a room together.
Right. And Washington is projecting a narrative of imminent diplomatic breakthrough or dire consequence, while Tehran is projecting a narrative of complete detachment.
Which is where things get incredibly dangerous. You have two completely different realities being broadcast.
Okay, so let's play this out. If a president's diplomatic threats are losing their punch globally, and Congress and the courts are limiting his policy options at home, doesn't this fading leverage actually make the situation, way more volatile?
Oh, absolutely.
Won't an administration just bypass the need for diplomacy entirely and rely on unilateral executive or military action to force the issue, just to prove they still have teeth?
Well, that is the exact concern raised by intelligence analysts in the reporting. When the rhetorical tools stop functioning, the temptation to use physical tools skyrockets.
And we were talking about the Strait of Hormuz here.
Right. The physical reality of that choke point doesn't care about diplomatic confusion in Washington. There are very real shipping disruptions happening. Commercial vessels require astronomical insurance rates to pass through.
And oil prices are just swinging wildly based on the hopes of negotiations that, frankly, might be entirely fictional.
Exactly. The reality on the water is highly combustible.
So that same disconnect between public performance and hidden reality isn't just happening in foreign palaces. It's exactly what primary voters are trying to decipher right now here at home.
Oh, the primaries are fascinating right now.
Yeah, we have an NPR report covering 5 states holding primaries today. We're talking Michigan, Missouri, Washington, Virginia, and Kansas.
And it's crucial to look past the surface of these races because these aren't just standard Democrats versus Republicans matchups.
Right, they're internal fights.
Exactly. These are internal ideological civil wars that will dictate the operating system of both major parties for the next decade.
I think of it like a sports team's training camp. You
Yeah.
know, we are so obsessed with the general election, like the Super Bowl, but today is really about the brutal internal scrimmages that decide who actually gets to take the field.
That's a great way to frame it. The scrimmages are where the real identity of the team is forged.
And I'm looking at Michigan specifically. Why is Michigan constantly the tectonic plate where all these ideological fault lines seem to crack open first?
Well, Michigan is really the epicenter because of its demographics. It's the ultimate microcosm. You have massive industrial labor, huge urban centers like Detroit, and then these vast rural stretches.
Right, it's a little bit of everything. So let's talk about the Senate race there. Representative Haley Stevens is running as the experienced center-left candidate.
And against her is Abdul El-Said, running a highly progressive campaign focused heavily on Medicare for all. The winner of that scrimmage goes on to face Republican Mike Rogers.
And the governor's race is just as fractured, right? Dems are choosing between Jocelyn Benson and Chris Swanson, while the GOP is choosing between Trump-endorsed John James and Perry Johnson.
Right, and it's not just the statewide races. We're seeing these House showdowns, too.
Oh, right. Like in Detroit, you have Sri Thanadar versus Donovan McKinney. And in Missouri, there's that huge rematch of Wesley Bell versus Cori Bush.
And over in Washington State's 4th District, you literally have a 3-way GOP split between the establishment, the conservative, and the outsider wings.
It really is a civil war. What do these margins actually tell us? Because a lot of these districts lean heavily one way or the other for the general election.
The margins today are vital because it's all about voter enthusiasm. These margins will give the first real measurable clues about the political landscape heading into November. It's not just about winning seats. It's about seeing which narrative actually motivates voters to get off the couch.
Well, a question of how you motivate someone to leave their house brings us directly to the fuel of these campaigns, which is cash.
And there is a lot of it right now.
So much cash. And that leads us to a report from the New York Times about AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee.
Yeah, the Times reporting highlights how AIPAC is pouring just unprecedented sums into Democratic primaries.
Right, backing traditional pro-Israel Democrats and specifically targeting critics of Israel.
Exactly. In that Michigan Senate race we just broke down, El-Said has made opposing AIPAC's influence a central theme of his campaign. Meanwhile, Stevens benefits from millions of dollars in spending by pro-Israel lobby groups.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. I'm going to play devil's advocate here, keeping our strict neutrality in mind.
Go for it.
If we look at this neutrally, aren't environmental groups or labor unions doing the exact same thing? They spend money to elect people who agree with them. Why is the AI-packed spending specifically triggering such a massive, broader referendum on campaign finance?
That's a fair question. The differentiator, according to the reporting, is the sheer overwhelming scale of the spending.
Ah, so it's the volume.
Right. When you drop that much cash into a regional primary, you buy up almost all the available television and digital ad inventory. The local candidates just don't have the financial defenses to compete.
Which threatens to reshape the whole party.
Exactly. It threatens to reshape the Democratic Party's future and the U.S.-Israel relationship by creating an incredibly expensive political litmus test. It goes back to your savings account analogy earlier. Well, when outside money speaks this loudly, voters start questioning the credibility of the politicians' narratives. They wonder, is this their actual stance? Or did someone just buy the microphone?
Right. Is it authentic or engineered? Which perfectly sets up the perspective of the newsletter editor, Bill Davis, included in our source material. He believes that PACs and super PACs should just be abolished entirely.
He takes a very hardline stance on this.
Very hardline. He argues that political contributions should be strictly limited to individuals within their own state. Like, if you live in Colorado, you shouldn't be allowed to fund an Ohio race.
It's a push for hyper-localizing politics, and it directly pushes back on this era of nationalized narratives and nationalized money-bulldozing local issues.
Yeah, that question of who your representative actually works for bleeds perfectly into our next source.
Yeah.
Because we've looked at how money influences who gets elected. Now we need to look at what happens once they are actually in power.
Specifically, how they view and utilize the justice system itself.
Exactly. We have a raw story report about the nomination of Todd Blanche for Attorney General. And it's pretty wild.
Oh, it was less of a confirmation hearing and more of a hostage negotiation over institutional leverage.
It really was. So Republican Senators Tom Tillis and John Cornyn had delayed Blanche's nomination. They held it up over concerns about a massive $1.776 billion Justice Department fund.
They were demanding written orders from Blanche that this fund wouldn't be used to benefit Trump allies.
Which is crazy, right? Senators from the president's own party demanding written guarantees.
Yeah.
Tillis did eventually advance the nomination, but he used the hearing to just absolutely blast the weaponization of the DOJ, and he blamed both parties.
Right. He explicitly said nobody's clean here.
He cited the FBI's crossfire hurricane, the IRS targeting conservatives, and Biden's final pardons.
Which is a stark admission that the narrative of a blind, impartial justice system is just that, a narrative. Both sides view the DOJ as a political weapon.
But then, I'm sorry, I have to pause here. The hearing takes a turn into the completely absurd.
But the seashells.
Yes, the seashells. We've gone from debating a $1.7 billion justice fund to beechcrafts. Tillis was furious about a prosecution involving former FBI Director James Comey. Apparently, Comey posted a photo on social media of some seashells arranged to spell the numbers 86 and 47.
And that triggered a DOJ inquiry.
Yes, someone decided it was a secret code. Tillis literally stated that if the case rests solely on that photo of seashells, someone should be fired. How does a confirmation hearing for the Attorney General devolve into this level of absurdity?
Well, the seashell anecdote perfectly encapsulates Tillis's core argument. Nobody is clean, and the apex legal apparatus of the country is bogged down in petty, retaliatory theater. Washington's favorite pastime is accusing the other side of corruption while defending their own.
It's just gridlocked by its own hypocrisy.
Exactly. And Tillis explicitly said he hopes Blanche will bend the curve of this absurdity before the August recess.
Wow. Okay, well, we've spent this entire deep dive talking about metaphorical political fires, right? The rhetorical gasoline poured on global negotiations, the campaign cash fueling primary battles. But I want to ground us now in a tragic physical reality where someone literally poured gasoline.
The situation in Spokane is just devastating.
It really is. We have an Al Jazeera report out of Spokane, Washington. Authorities have arrested 37-year-old Aaron Farinacci. He is suspected of starting the Old Trails fire and is being held on a $1 million bond for first-degree arson.
And the detail that stands out is that a witness allegedly saw him kneeling in the grass right where the fire started.
The scale of the destruction is immense. We're talking about 3 fires, over 8,000 acres scorched, and 65,000 people evacuated. Aerial surveys estimate that between 700 and 1,110 structures have been completely destroyed.
It's just catastrophic.
Thankfully, there are no reported injuries yet, though 14 people do remain unreachable.
And the report pulls back to look at the climate context here, which is crucial. UCLA climatologist Daniel Swain notes that an unusually warm winter and a severe snow drought created the perfect tinderbox.
Right, the environment was just primed for disaster. And this is part of a global trend, isn't it?
Absolutely. The report mentions extreme heat alerts in Japan, record temperatures in South Korea, and massive wildfires across Greece, Spain, France, and North Africa.
It's wild how our brains have to process this. I mean, we have this massive, terrifying global climate trend record heat in Asia, snow droughts in Washington. But it took one single guy, allegedly kneeling in the grass, to ignite a disaster that displaced 65,000 people. It's the macro and the micro violently colliding.
That's a really powerful way to look at it. You have to synthesize the dual nature of the tragedy. You have these structural vulnerabilities like the dry environment due to the snow drought, but they still require a catalyst.
The spark.
Exactly, the arsonist. And it connects this physical event back to the overarching theme of our whole discussion today. The reality of nature doesn't care about our political narratives.
It burns regardless.
Right. You can debate climate policy, you can argue about the DOJ, but when the brush is dry and a spark hits, reality always wins.
So true. Let's just briefly recap the journey we've taken today, tying these threads together. We started by looking at the fading power of presidential bluster globally, where leaders are learning to separate rhetoric from reality.
Then we looked at the intense, cash-fueled primary battles at home.
Right, where voters are trying to figure out what narratives are actually authentic. Then we examined the absurd weaponization of the justice system. And finally, the literal fires burning in Washington state where structural vulnerabilities met a human catalyst.
And looking at all of these sources, I think there's a final really provocative question based on the material that you should mull over.
Oh, lay it on us.
If foreign leaders have learned to completely ignore political bluster, and if voters are becoming hyper-aware of the millions of dollars artificially shaping primary narratives, are we entering an era where political rhetoric has finally lost its power?
That is a fascinating question.
Right. And if politicians realize their threats and their ads no longer work, what drastic physical actions might they take next to prove they are still in control?
Man, that is a chilling thought to leave on. When the painted plywood walls finally start to wobble, what do they do to keep the illusion alive? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. Keep questioning the narrative, look for the reality underneath, and we will catch you next time.